you recognise this, it's the Mega Tracker CB1100, trying to see whether we can sort out why the receive's so dead. It's got an IF problem, but how deep I want to go into it is another question, because of double-sided delicate printed circuit board. So changed two filters, made an improvement, but not right. Anyway, that's not what we're doing today. We're going to look at this 1951 practical television magazine, and I actually need to go and research something on my computer before we actually open it up. Okay, that's what I've wanted to just research. I want to know what government was in place in 1951, seeing as I wasn't born till 62. So in the editorial, the Yorkshire Electricity Board is a branch of the Nationalised Electricity Service, and they've entered into competition with private traders by retailing radio and television sets. This is grossly unfair competition with local ratepayers. Now, so of course, what they're saying here is you've got a nationalised industry, and it's like having your local council opening a television and radio shop and then putting your rent up for your radio and television shop. The council's renting you your shop, but they don't have to bother because they've already got a radio and television shop. So they're saying really some of these manufacturers need boycotting for supplying local authorities in such a way, which is interesting. So in the next month, which I printed off for my own benefit, I was looking at the editorial. I've just got the page here. The increase of purchase tax. So this was the tax before value-added tax, which is currently 20%. You'll probably remember when value-added tax came in, it was at 3 levels: 8%, 12.5%, and 25%. And it was so bizarre that we had transistors, I think they were at 8%, but if you bought microchips, they were seen as a luxury item, and so they were 25% VAT, which didn't help the progress of technology at all. And here's another ridiculous situation. It's 1951, so what? We've only had television back in the UK. I talk about television, I'm looking at television. I haven't had a television for 24 years. I don't miss it, but I am interested in this type of era when it was just coming back into the UK. And remember, it's single channel, black and white, 405 line, VHF. So the increase of the purchase tax on television receivers from 33 1/3% to 66 2/3%. So what about that for VAT? 66.66%. Wow. Has caused manufacturers some concern. And the Labour government at that time would see television as a luxury, and so you can jolly well pay for it. Unbelievable. 66% sales tax. It's only when you read stuff like this that it's an eye-opener. So using this ex-military... I've got something in the way. I can see a mark on my... Oh, it's probably just dust on. It's not the light, is it? I think I've got one of the cables showing, haven't I? Yeah. Not really much I can do about that. Right, U62 was a experimental unit using a surplus indicator unit, no doubt for the aircraft thing from the war. So built around electrostatic oscilloscope type tube. And then they're talking about this next article about 1895. I think it's 1895. 1817, selenium had been discovered, and making a matrix of photocells in a very crude way of having some kind of television. So it would be, if you've got how they show it, 3/6 by 3/6, 7 by 6, you've got 48 pixels of resolution, haven't you? Voltage multipliers, how they work, and this is still relevant today, you see. So you've got your AC and you're rectifying it, and you are increasing it. Hence we had triplers for televisions. And the maths behind working out the capacitors for the necessary volts. So in this case, you've got 1,000 volts going in and 6,000 volts going out. I just find it sometimes difficulty in the theory behind some of these things, and this is when you're looking back at old magazines. My late mother fancied having a valve radio, so I built her a valve radio from scratch, medium wave only. It cost me about £120 to build, but the point is that I had to build a radio frequency choke because I couldn't get one, and I actually had to buy some tough knoll rod, go into the organ workshop, put grooves into it to hold turns of wire in with the lathe, and then wind something like 250 turns times 10 on this thing. And I did like one an evening because I hadn't got a coil winder at the time, doing it by hand, 250 turns. And at the end of the session, I put my peak LCR meter on it, and it was the right number of Henrys. So, and that was from a 1937 practical wireless, at a time when you were making components. How to mount your circular picture tube. How to mount your circular picture tube with straps. How to mount it with springs. Curtain springs. Hey, look at this then. Stabilised power supply. So, what's his maximum? 150 volts. So using an S130 neon regulator, using two 6L6s for the output valve, they don't mention the rectifier, and then you're using an EF50, which was very much prevalent at the time on the surplus market. A sound converter. So this looks like it is indeed a converter, which is going to cause your VHF. See, you only got VHF band 1 at the time. You know, this is the time we've got single channel BBC 1 only on VHF channels 1 through to 5 as it was, and so this is going to be around 50 megs to convert to the IF of your receiver. Any news that we can look at? $12,377 radio licenses. This is for receive radio. Now, it was abolished in 1971. It was 10 shillings, which was 50 pence. And then you had the black and white TV license or the colour TV license. And these days you still do. It's somewhere around £50 for a black and white license, and somewhere around 160 for a colour TV license. And I have had a black and white license in the past, and I did have them come round and check it was a black and white license. I didn't mind letting them and showing them, because it was. And if you live in an area like this where it's very poor television reception, and I'm certainly not doing satellite and all that kind of rigmarole. Off air, a very scratchy picture. It is better in black and white than having the colour coming in and out. Anyway, it's gone digital since 2000, and I could only get 3 channels. Mark lent me a set-top box. I got Auction Jewellery Channel, Sky Sports News, which is about the last thing I want to see, and then finally I got Channel 4 plus 1 hour in Welsh. Some of these kit form television receivers. Building one round a 6-inch cathode ray tube, ex-military, intended for radar. And all the only other parts you needed were £17 in the tube. Wow. The Miller Time Base. Coloured solder. I've seen things soldered with coloured solder. Red, blue, green or yellow coloured rosin. That doesn't seem to have been something which carried on. And here you are to build, here's the project, a compact televisor, because television was a trade name of the Baird company. His televisor was called Television. Just like with player pianos, the Aeolian company had the brand name Pianola. And people go, oh, I've got a pianola. No, it's a player piano, and that's the brand name. Or you're going to be cleaning the carpet with your vacuum cleaner, which would, of course, be the popular one being Hoover. I'm hoovering. And in fact, of course, it is a brand. Just imagine if the firm Goblin, who were very famous for making tea maids as well as vacuum cleaners, if they'd have been first, they'd have been Goblin the carpet rather than hoovering it, wouldn't you? There's the compact televisor on the front. 15 quid in a tube. Could actually still build this, and if you've got one of those, and people know about 405 line conversion, is it an Aurora or something? There's some expensive converter thing to do the standards conversion. You could actually watch things on that today on a nice green 6-inch screen. That kind of thing appeals to me, to be honest. Spending my rest of my retirement in about 4 years when I retire, I could spend the next 10 years building that, and then get a black and white TV license at the end of it. Homemade transformers. The definition of limits, talking about 3 megs resolution. Massive soldering irons. And they just bought, recently the BBC had bought Lime Grove Studios, which were former film studios. Of course they've demolished them now, but and they were converting the studios into television studios. And they started with Studio D, and they were going to start with some children's programs. We've got a picture there of the controller. I'll just zoom in on that. So this is in the foreground a gramophone reproducers for sound effects and a sound mixer desk, at which the engineer controls and blends the outputs of the mics in the studio. Facing the engineer are 3 monitors, one showing a picture on transmission, and the other 2 for preview and pictures from any of the other cameras. On the other side of the glass screen are the producer and his assistant, senior engineer and the vision mixer. They can see the studio through the window on the right. There you go. Gramophone reproducers. And there we are. Let's go back into our normal position, or we will be not looking at anything else. That's that. and then we'll just widen it from there and move it up a fraction, and that's about where we were. Whoever Iconos was, he seems to be into theatre lighting. I think that's was his trade. Always interesting. And then we've got some advertisements. An analysis of the effect of television programmes on the younger generation. Even by this point, I was reading in one of these articles that the average American was watching something like 5.5 hours of television a day. We didn't even have 5.5 hours of television in the UK. So. Yeah, talking about changing vocabulary amongst children, etc. And Erzin multi-core are still going. I've got the RS one here, but on Mr. Chippy's bench we have got the Erzin multi-core one, and it was £45 a reel. And there we go, the back cover. I printed 2 of these off by mistake, so I'll stick one of these on eBay, because somebody might want a printed bound one rather than download it, which is, I've got these, and I know one of the downloads from that American World magazine site, they've only got the black and white photocopy of the cover of one of these around this era. I've got the actual magazine, and I really ought to scan it and send them the colour copy of the cover. I think that would be a nice gesture. So I hope you had a nice enjoyment of looking through 1951 television magazine, when television was probably exciting. I'd have found it exciting at that time, but the programme content these days doesn't leave me enthralled at all. And I think one of the things that makes me fed up, when I look at videotapes that I recorded in the 80s, and we do have a large screen video monitor, I do have DVD player, I do have VHS players and other formats, and when I look at the things, there's 2 things come to mind. When you're looking at independent television programmes, they would run, let's say I recorded the James Bond film Christmas Day, it would run for 22 minutes, then there'd be 5 minutes of advertisements, then it ran for 22 minutes, and there was 5 minutes of advertisements. But television isn't like that today. And they have this, even BBC do the same, they have this constant recap. Well, I was in the dentist, and I think Homes Under the Hammer was some auction. Mr. Smith is looking for a house in Cheltenham, and he's going to the auction. Meanwhile, in in Bradford, Mrs. Smith is looking for a bungalow, and she's going to the auction. And then they go back, they talk some spiel, then they go back and Mr. So-and-so in Cheltenham is looking for a house. Well, we've told us all this. Like, we've only just come into the programme. And then they have, like, advert breaks when they don't have adverts. I just find the whole thing bizarre. And the other thing which I find bizarre is fast camera shots. Half a second on this, half a second on that. Nothing smooth. It's dub. Oh, it makes me feel tired just looking at 3 minutes of that. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Maybe I have to get a CB done tomorrow. We've got a Barnet M 5-star from a customer in a state and a half.